Hello, my name is Danelle. I'm in my mid-30s and I was nominated for this project because of the work I've been doing as an author and speaker over the last 3 years. I began writing out of a place of desperation, really. In 2012, I was diagnosed with lupus, and at the same time, my husband was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. He received treatment and has been cancer free since 2013, praise the Lord. But since that time, my health journey has been filled with hills and valleys. And in 2017, it was a particularly rough year for me. I ended up in the hospital several times. And in September of that year, I was admitted and stayed there for about 6 weeks. During that time, I had multiple infections. Every time the doctors thought they cleared up something else would pop up. I had kidney issues. I was in constant pain. I was bedridden. I could not move my legs for most of my time there. I developed diabetes and I was just sick. It was a very horrible experience. And I remember lying in my bed, being unable to move and just weeping, bawling, and saying, God, what am I do? And I didn't know what else to do. So I remember that night I decided to just have my devotion because I didn't know what else to do. And during that time, God spoke to me very clearly. And I remember writing down what he said, and the next morning I sent a WhatsApp message to my family members and friends who had been praying for me, just sharing what God had said. And that became my survival strategy for the rest of my time in the hospital. I'd wake up in the morning, have my time with the Lord, hear what he says, write a message and send it out. And that's where it was birthed. That I would get better and leave the hospital, be able to go home to my family. And I did get well enough to be released. And then upon reaching home, I got several messages from persons asking me to continue sending out the devotional readings. So I did. As I continued, my desire, my hope, my expectation was that my health would at least stabilize or hopefully improve. However, that wasn't the case. In fact, from 2018 to 2019, I got worse. And I ended up being hospitalized to date about almost 20 times. And so that desperation and dependence on God has continued. And so I've continued writing. And what has happened is that what started as me sending encouraging messages to a handful of my family and friends has now become a ministry that the Lord has used, in which I send out messages to over 1,000 people every day, almost every day. I've been invited to speak to groups of persons, both locally and internationally. I have an actual published work out now as of last year. And so that has far exceeded anything I thought would come out of this. I never consider myself a writer. I don't consider myself a content creator. I simply speak, write about my life and share what God has said to me. And it has blown my mind how he has used it to impact lives. And when I do get feedback from persons just saying how relevant and applicable the messages have been for them, persons who have shared with other people and have been told that this is exactly what they needed to hear. Having conversations where somebody will say that they were going through the exact same thing that I wrote about and just never thought that there was anybody who could understand. And that has been the highlight, just seeing the impact that this has had and the way that God has used it. The fact that I have things to write about. The fact remains that every day I wake up, I am fighting a life-threatening illness. I have come very close to dying at several points in my life, and so it's hard. There are days when I don't feel strong. I don't feel like I want to encourage anybody. I don't feel like I can get up. I don't feel like I can do it. But God still speaks, so I still write. But it's not always easy. I'm not always the joyful servant. It's difficult, but I have seen enough of what God has been doing with this to know that I should push past how I feel and what I'm feeling, and trust that He will continue to do what He has been doing. The responses have been overwhelming, encouragingly overwhelming, or overwhelmingly encouraging. I don't know. I'm not really exposed to the negative criticism, if there is any. So mainly, as I mentioned earlier, it's just hearing of how persons' lives are impacted, how encouraged people have been simply by reading the devotionals, how relevant a day's reading can be for the life of someone totally random. I've gotten feedback from strangers who have received my devotional through a friend, and the response has been amazing. God has touched a lot of lives through this, and I'm grateful. Service is difficult. Service is rough. Service is tiring. Service can be very unrewarding in the moment, and I would say to anybody who is serving in any way, whether you are out on the front line, in this 2020 time, or you serve as an intercessor in your prayer closet at home, whatever you're doing, keep on doing it. There is a saying that a page out of your story will one day become somebody's survival guide. And in serving, you never know the impact that you're having. And it is hard to keep going when you're not seeing the fruit, you're not being paid, you are sacrificing your time, your resources, even putting your life at risk. But there is at least one life that is going to be greatly impacted by the work that you're doing, and you may never know about it until years down the road. So don't stop. Keep on going. I have so many. I am surrounded by people daily who inspire me, family members and friends, and if I were to name names, I would not stop talking. But someone whose story has greatly impacted and inspired me is a man by the name of Horatio G. Spafford. He was a wealthy lawyer in the 1800s, and unfortunately he lost most of his fortune in the Chicago fire of 1871. And so 2 years after that, he and his family were to travel to Europe. He had business commitments, and so his wife and 4 daughters went ahead of him. And he later received a message from his wife. The ship that they had been traveling on had sunk, and she messaged him to say, "Saved, alone." All 4 of his daughters had drowned when the ship sank. And on his way to Europe to grieve with his wife, he penned the lyrics of what is a very popular hymn today, "It Is Well With My Soul." I remember hearing that story for the first time in 2015, and over the past 5 years, it has really helped me to keep perspective during my rough moments, just knowing that I can literally lose everything. I can come close to death, which I have. I can be in pain, I can be miserable, but everything will be okay as long as I can say it is well with my soul. And so that's someone who inspires me to this day. there is a purpose to your pain. I have never considered myself to be a writer, and so God has really shown me that all that I'm going through is for the purpose of encouraging others and helping someone else to go through a similar situation. And I would say to other people, bloom where you are planted. Service looks different. You may have two persons who are in the exact same organization, exact same ministry, and serving side by side, and what each person does looks completely different. And I really felt very unworthy to be a part of this project because I don't do very much. There are days when I can't even get out of bed and somebody else has to come and take care of myself and my family members. And so it's often hard to consider myself as serving people. But just like with Moses, God has said, what is in your hand? And I literally have my phone in my hand. And even on the most extreme of sick days, I can take up my phone, spend time with the Lord, and write a message to send out to hundreds of people and encourage them. And so you may not think that you have much or anything at all to offer, but look at what God has placed in your hand and allow Him to use it.